Good evening. Well, two very exciting speakers. Mine is not super exciting, but I will try to walk you through a story of which I've learned lessons from, and I hope to share it with you so that it might inspire you to think. I was born in Tripoli in 1989, and I was told that the 80s were the worst years of repression of the dictatorship of Muammar Gaddafi. He had, at that time, dismantled all institutions. He had conducted a mass political experimentation that produced the socialist system of governance by popular vote. I was raised during the years of the sanctions when Libya was in isolation and propaganda was our education and life. So in 2010 and 2011, when protests swept over North Africa, we didn't dare really hope as young people because our dictator is different from the other dictators. But we wanted change. And so when I think about it, it all began for me when my best friend emailed me on February 9th about helping him set up protests that would happen at the same time in Tripoli and Benghazi on February 17th. He disappeared 3 days later, and I didn't know that that would be the last time I've heard from him. That was the start of the uprising in Libya against Muammar Gaddafi. I wasn't sure in the beginning that I wanted to get involved. Violence had spread so quickly, and then there was an intervention by the Security Council and NATO, and then it was war. Like many other Libyans, we were shell-shocked watching it on TV. But when I heard that my best friend was executed in detention, I decided to join February 17th coalition in a humanitarian division. So I helped set up a field hospital in Tripoli for when the rebels would come. And then it was a lot of waiting. It was 8 months of propaganda on the news, being cut off from the world, long power cuts, dwindling resources, fear, uncertainty. And then Tripoli fell in a day, which was surprising because it was supposed to be the dictatorship's stronghold. In that night, I joined a field hospital, and then I moved to the military hospital. And so when I think about my work there, I always reflect about how different war was from what I've watched on TV or of what I've heard over the 8 months than what I have actually experienced. To see the devastating consequences of violence firsthand it's life-changing. And I've always been from February on the side of the toppling of the dictatorship, and seeing the suffering of Libyans on the hands of Gaddafi's forces have made me be in a very dark place. And one night I was reflecting on all this rage and anger and hurt, and I thought that this is not me. So the next day I went to the doctor and I volunteered to be a nurse for Gaddafi's forces soldiers who were at the hospital. People don't volunteer for them. The doctors they treat them out of duty. But I dedicated myself for a while to feed them, help them, give them medications, and clean them. And I thought I was punishing myself. I didn't speak to them. I didn't look at them. I wore a bracelet with the opposition flag so that they know which side I am on. Until one very early morning, I was giving a round of antibiotics, and this young man looks at me for the first time since I've worked helping them. He looks at me, and I looked back, and he said, "You make me feel inhuman." And what I saw was me. He had the same pain, same bewilderment. And I realized then that we were both Libyans, thrown on opposite sides as enemies of a war that we didn't decide, we didn't plan. And at that time, we didn't even know why it was happening the way it was happening. So I sat next to him and we both cried for a while. I didn't speak to him afterwards. I never saw him again. But he was the one who showed me his humanity. And I realized then that in war, it's not black and white, and that there are no sides. So soon after, I started to see the forces that I was supporting committing atrocities. So I was disillusioned and I left my post. But I was restless because I couldn't, after all I've seen, I couldn't just sit still. So I had a full-time position at a non-governmental organization that worked on youth, but at the same time, I was part of so many initiatives, helping preparing for the first elections Libya has had in 50 years, working on issues of violence and women's rights, protesting all the time. And this work is super difficult. We are stretched thin, we don't have resources, it wasn't exactly safe. But in that brief period of time, we were free to work. Until summer 2014, when the wars started again. And many colleagues, activists, and friends were assassinated. That was the last time I protested in Tripoli. And I try, when I talk about the war in Libya, to also tell you about what you don't know about war, because I know that you know about the blood, the destruction, the rubbles, all the devastating consequences. You see it on the news, you read it about in the books, you watch it in movies, but they don't tell you about those who continue to live through war. They don't tell you about the teachers who raise new generations. They don't tell you about women who start businesses to help their communities. They don't tell you about the students celebrating their graduations in front of bombed campuses. They don't tell you about the broken trust in the community, about the instability that hangs on your head like a sword. You never know what will happen to you or your loved ones. They don't tell you about the internally displaced who, despite all the odds, teach their children to love a country that has rejected them. They don't tell you about all these amazing people who get up in the morning, they hear the shelling and the bombing, and they go to their jobs or their schools. They take, maybe active or not, but they take the conscious choice to resist the war by building lives. And these people are all on all sides, and knowing and seeing and being among them does not give you ever the choice to give up. And when I think about resistance, in this instance, resistance of war, is to maintain the beauty of daily life. It's to continue to live. And I decided that I would resist it by working, which is how I established all these organizations. And I've started all these projects, but I also always wanted to see the bigger picture behind the individual acts. So I've worked across the Middle East and North Africa in transferring knowledge and understanding. I came to see that communities experience conflict very similar. They react to it also quite similarly. Individuals care deeply about the people in their communities, about the issues that impact them. But we don't always think of that as active participation. To my utter dismay, for a person who was only able to vote twice in her life, people don't even vote. So that's engagement, that caring never translates into political democratic decisions. Change, as I believe in, comes from self-reflection, from the recognition that good intentions and thoughts are not enough. We need to work together, and we need to organize together and be more efficient. It's not enough to have associations, foundations, and political parties. You need to be able to sit together and to work with your communities and countries and people who face similar challenges around the world, but most importantly, to be able to work with people who you've put on the other side, people who have opposite polar views. Because I know it's hard to sit and have a conversation with a person very different, and you might even consider as an enemy. But at the end of the day, unless you believe in violence, they are part of a solution. You cannot come out to the solution without bringing all these different voices together. And I know this might sound controversial to some of you, but I think that people are driven by the desire for change, and sometimes that even they take extreme measures in thinking that they're focused so much on what they want that they use violence. But we never ask ourselves, we never stop to pause and think, is this helping anyone? Are we enabling only people with similar beliefs to be in power over other people? These are very difficult questions, but I ask you to engage constructively in your own communities. Think of your agency. Think about what you care about. But also ask yourself, how can I do this without oppressing others? How can I stop this cycle of continuous violence that happens in all of our societies across the world? We need to confront what divides us, and that's by asking ourselves these very difficult questions. Across all the world and throughout history, humans have always tried to do violence. They've fought, they've resisted, they tear things down. But I think we know better now. We know better than to do that. That we need to have to make that choice. That we need to build and make our lives better and build societies by being together. Thank you.